Hello and welcome to my review of Encodya. All of the gameplay you'll see in this video was captured on a PlayStation 5 console, but the game's also available right now on all consoles and PC. Also, I need to inform you that a review code was provided to me by the publisher. Remember, if you enjoy this video or find it useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. So what's Encodya all about? Well, for all intents and purposes, it's a traditional point-and-click adventure game. The game is set in a futuristic Neo-Berlin during the year 2062. At night, it's a dark but neon-soaked maze, and by day, it's a dense, sprawling concrete jungle that seems to go on forever. Absolutely everything in this Blade Runner-esque future is controlled by enormous corporations that drains the life and hope from everyone who isn't a part of them. You take control of two characters that you can switch between at the press of a button, a 9-year-old orphan girl named Tina and her large robot protector, Sam 53. They make the best of living in a makeshift shelter on a rooftop, surviving on scraps and siphoning a small amount of power from the large neon sign that towers above their home. As usual on this channel, I won't be spoiling any of the story here, and all the gameplay you'll see is from the very start of the game, but I will give you the basic setup. Essentially what happens is that one day Tina discovers that her father has left her a message, and this message contains a mission to complete his work and save everyone from the dreary life that has slowly become the norm. During the game, you'll be progressing through the story by solving puzzles in the old school point-and-click style. For those of you that aren't familiar with that genre, you essentially explore the environment, picking up various items and talking to different NPCs in order to figure out what you need to do. Point-and-click games don't tend to hold your hand too much, and the main mechanic of these kind of games is the process of figuring out what to do. Gameplay-wise, you don't do any platforming or really any combat or quick time events or anything of that nature. It's simply find items, use items, talk to NPCs, and explore the environment to figure out how to move forward. Sometimes you may need to combine items in order to find a solution to a certain situation, and the answers that you seek aren't always obvious. The game is fully voice acted with over 30 NPCs to meet and over 100 locations to visit as you set out on your new mission. At times you'll even encounter some randomly generated puzzles and discover 10 secret items as you make your way through the streets of Neo-Berlin. There really isn't anything else I can talk about just in case I ruin a puzzle or parts of the story, although I'm pretty sure that by this point you understand what the game's about, so let's get into my personal opinions, starting with what I liked. So firstly, I found the atmosphere in this game to be very alluring. I really love the backgrounds and the theme and the world design in general. To me, it's absolutely brilliant and very well done from an artistic point of view. I'm not as keen on some of the character models, some are better than others I think, but the backgrounds and the environments that you explore are great. I think these kind of environments do an important job in a game like this. They give you a real sense of place, and I was always really happy to see what the next area would look like. And to be honest, every time I saw a new area, it felt like a reward in itself. Another thing I enjoyed about the game was something that, in fairness, is common in all point-and-click adventure games, and that's the sense of overcoming the puzzle and having that kind of eureka moment when you finally realize what you're supposed to do. Of course, this same thing can be thought of as kind of frustrating or perhaps even a bad game design by some people, but I don't personally agree with that. I think it's what these kind of games are all about, and as I've already said, a huge part of this game is the act of looking for the solution itself. It's pretty much the whole deal when it comes to games like this, and discovering the answers in Encodya was a great feeling. Something else I'd like to mention is the story and the lore of the game. Of course, I can't talk too much about specifics, but what I will say is that I was intrigued throughout. There are a few sections that dragged for me a little bit, but that's because I couldn't figure out how to proceed, not because the narrative wasn't interesting. Obviously, liking or disliking a story is a subjective thing, but I thought it was really quite good, and some of the more obscure things, like the fact that all children are assigned a free Guardian Sam robot at birth, left me wanting to know a lot more. The game's also a decently long experience, clocking in at around 9 to 12 hours, depending on a few factors like if you're using hints or if you accidentally stumble onto the solutions quicker than another person would. And as I said earlier, there are some randomized puzzles in the game, so you might have a slightly different experience to another player. There is actually a trophy available for beating the game in under 4 hours, so that is possible, but on your first playthrough you can virtually triple that number. On top of that, the game's also quite affordable, coming in at around £25 in the UK or about $30 in the US. And I think that about does it for the positives, so now let's talk about some stuff I didn't like. In terms of negatives, I only really have two minor things that I want to talk about, and I will just say I don't think these complaints ruin the game in any way, but I think they are worth mentioning. So the first is that some of the character models and the voice acting is a bit off. Again, this is very subjective, but as an example, I liked the robot Sam-53 quite a lot. He looks suitably large and strong, but also sympathetic and caring despite being a robot. His voice is performed by Richard Epcar, who has voiced many characters from games and anime over the years, and he does a very good job of humanizing this robot character. When it comes to Tina though, I like her voice work, which was performed by Lizzie Freeman, who again has worked on a lot of games and anime for many years. But Tina's character model is just kinda odd. If I'm being completely honest, it's just a bit weird and almost creepy looking for some reason. I don't know exactly why I don't like it, but yeah, there's just something off about it and I'm really not a fan of it. When it comes to other NPCs in the game, I found that they're a bit hit and miss. Some look fine and some don't, some have good voice acting, but again, some don't. Overall, I think it's all pretty much fine, but I did find a good number of interactions that just felt a little bit strange. And the second thing is something that I wasn't even sure I was going to mention, but in the end I decided to talk about it just because it may bother some people out there. And so what that was right at the start of the game I noticed this poster of the game's antagonist, Mr. Rumpf, a corrupt mayor that bears a striking resemblance to a certain former US president. Now then, I've said many times on this channel I do not care about politics. I don't follow it at all, and when it comes to the USA, I literally have no horse in the race, so to speak. I'm an Englishman, I live in England, and I've said before, I'm not going to discuss my views on politics itself, other than to say I don't care about politics. I am, however, going to comment on a developer intentionally putting this into the game. So, I did my research, as I always do, and I found some discussions between players and the actual developers themselves regarding this exact topic. So long story short, players can see exactly what the developers have done, and the developers are basically denying that there's any reference here of any kind. Also, right at the beginning of the game, you're greeted with this large disclaimer that honestly feels like the devs were trying to convince themselves, let alone the actual players. And I do urge you to pause here and to read this to fully get what I mean, so I'll give you a second to do that. The developers granted me a code for this review, and I do really appreciate that. But when you try that hard with a disclaimer, and then to include this kind of reference after that disclaimer, I'm sorry, I just don't believe you. And look, I don't know if the devs will ever see this review, but if one of you does happen to be watching, let me just say this. You made a good game, you really did. I really like it, and I think you should be genuinely proud of what you've made. But adding this kind of thing though, it's just not needed. Like, it's not a huge deal or anything, but I think people turn to video games to relax, to escape the real world, and to kind of be the hero of their own story, so to speak. And I guess I can't speak for everyone, but I don't believe that players want or need references to real-life, current-day politics in our video games. And it doesn't matter to me if you are for or against this specific person that's being referenced. Having said that, I'm also not pro-censorship in any way, so if this is truly what you wanted to do, then fine, it's your game and you are absolutely free to create it however you like without compromise. But maybe don't try to have your cake and eat it too, Maybe don't put the reference in and then write a huge disclaimer trying to convince yourself and us that it isn't one. And I know what I just said might make it sound like some sort of huge deal, but it isn't. It really isn't. It doesn't make the game bad or anything even close to that, but at the end of the day, this is my review and it bothers me personally when people do this kind of thing and then pretend they didn't. But with that out of the way, let's move on to the conclusion and recommendation section. Overall, I think that Encodya is a very competent modern-day point-and-click adventure with an interesting narrative and impressive art direction. Sure, some of the character models are a bit inconsistent and a few of the voice actors aren't quite up to the job, but gameplay-wise, it definitely delivers on that old-school adventure game feeling. I think this game would be easy to recommend to anyone who already enjoys point-and-click adventure games, of course. But I can see this being a bit of a hard sell for anyone under the age of 20 or perhaps even 25. I think if you're a little bit older and you've played things like Monkey Island, Sam & Max, or possibly Day of the Tentacle back in the day, then you'll probably have a good time with this game. Personally, I believe that the vast majority of younger players won't have the patience or the attention span to fully appreciate something like this, which sadly does limit its market. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all young people are like that, and there will definitely be some exceptions, but I think in general, if you were to think about any teenager in the current year of 2021, I just can't see them getting invested in something like this, at least not easily. And you know what, it's not even their fault, it's just how gaming has progressed or in some cases regressed over the years. However, I do recommend Encodya if you're looking for a little bit of old school charm. And so there you go, that's my review of Encodya. It's available right now on all consoles and PC. And just a quick note, it is all digital download, there currently isn't a physical edition available. But if you have any questions, or perhaps there was something that I missed that you'd like to know about, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, I hope today will be the day that I earn your subscription, and if you want to support the channel even further, all the important links are in the video description down below. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.